present.
Commissioner Dozier,
Barely here.
Walking in.
Commissioner Minor,
Here.
Commissioner Matlow,
Here.
Commissioner Richardson,
Yep.
Commissioner Williams-Cox,
Curtis. Can't hear. There you go.
Any
Thank you,
agenda
Commissioner.
modification?
No, sir, there are no amendments to the, or modifications to the agenda, excuse me.
Any citizen comments?
We did not receive any cards, but if there is someone that wishes to speak, they may do so at this point.
Anyone wishing to speak at this point? Okay. Consent agenda.
Moved consent agenda, Mr.
Second.
Chairman.
There is a motion to approve the consent agenda, and second, all in favor should, by the sign of vote, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
I'm good. How about you?
Any consent items pulled for discussion?
No, sir, there were not. Yes, sir, next up are our amendments to our transportation and plan improvement program, excuse me. And there are two listed as part of the agenda, and Mr. Burke is going to give us an overview of those, and this would need to be a roll call vote.
Good afternoon, members. We have an amendment to our existing fiscal year 2019 to 2023 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. Specifically, we have two new projects. The first is designed for bike lanes on Smith Creek Road in western Leon County. The second is actually for improved lighting at intersections on US 27 from Thomasville Road north to Falk Drive, and that is for actually both design as well as construction. Both of those are for this current fiscal year 2019.
I'll make a motion to approve since I did grow up in Smith Creek.
Second.
There is a motion for approval and a second. I think this requires a roll call vote. Right?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Walker,
It's a roll call vote.
Commissioner McMillan,
Aye.
Commissioner Merritt,
Yes.
Commissioner Villavisier,
Yes.
Commissioner Dozier,
Yes.
Commissioner Minor,
Yes.
Commissioner Matlow,
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Yes.
Unanimously passes.
The next item for presentation. Oh, was it both?
Moving on into, no, we did both. I guess that was a question. Right, the first item up is our financial statements and program audit.
Okay, the first item up for discussion is 7A, financial fiscal year 2017 CRTPA financial statement and FDOT program audit.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll be taking that one today. We can pull the presentation up, please.
Somebody needs to adjust that projector.
What's that?
The keystone on your projector is off pretty.
Yes, a little off. I'm glad I got these new glasses so I can see it now. But what I want to do today is give you an overview of the two audits that were recently conducted for the CRTPA. As we go through this, I want to make note of the fact, first of all, that we will be requesting approval of the financial statements at the end of the presentation. So with that, during the past year, we've actually had two audits conducted. And my clicker's not working. Oh, here we go. Okay. Before I get into them, the one comment I want to make is first and foremost, and probably most importantly, there's no money missing and everything's accounted for.
That's a good thing.
So, that's the first thing we always look for. Having said that, of course, there are some things that the auditors recommend that we look at improving. So the first one we had is our 2017 fiscal financial audit, which covered the period of October 1st, 2016 through September 30th, 2017. This is our required annual audit and also includes what's called the single audit, which is required by the federal grants that we have received. This one was performed by Thomas Howell and Ferguson, They are the city's contracted audit firm. They're actually in the 2018 audit they will do here shortly will be the last one under that contract, and the city of Tallahassee is actually in process of putting together an RFP to go out and look to hire auditors again. The second one was from the DOT Office of Inspector General. This period covered from July 1st, 2016 to December 1st, 2017. This is a one-time occurrence. The OIG office is looking to audit 2 MPOs per year. That was their original plan. I'm not quite sure they're doing that, but ourselves, along with Lee County and Southwest Florida, were the 2 first lucky selectees in this process. And that audit was performed by the OIG staff, looking more so at our overall program and how we manage it versus a straight-up financial audit as the financial audit was. There were consistent issues that were identified as part of both audits. As I go through this today, I'm going to use the OIG audit as kind of my guide. That one was one that's a little bit more detailed in some of the issues that they identified. We'd actually began work on some of these issues back in 2017. If you recall, in June of that year, we, in essence, overhauled our Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. And I'll warn the new members, I'm trying very hard not to use acronyms today. So if I start to stumble, I'm having to think through what those things mean. But we started with an overhaul of our UPWP program, which is our 2-year budget that began to address some of the issues that we'd already identified in my first few months here and looked to try to improve those as we moved along. The first, I'm actually going to take them a little bit out of order as well. The first 2, financial management systems, which is item number 2, and timekeeping practices, which were number 6 in the OIG audit, if you're following along in your agenda packet. In essence, what the second item there talks about was, did not maintain adequate financial management, including our both automated and our manual processes, and those are some of the things that we're going to talk about as to what we've done to address these. Item number 6 related to our timesheets, not following proper procedures in terms of having them signed off and things like that, and really didn't follow the adopted City of Tallahassee policy as it relates to timesheets. The recommendation on item number 2 was, and I'm not going to read all these completely off, was basically develop and establish detailed procedures and also document those as well. In terms of item number 6, it talks about providing training to staff members regarding the timekeeping policy as well as developing their timesheets. So the actions that we've taken, we've actually worked quite a bit with the City of Tallahassee's Financial Service Office since they are our actual, the City of Tallahassee is our host agency. We've updated the timesheets, and that was something we did back in mid-2017 to address some of the issues, again, that we had already identified. I actually established a 2-person review and an executive sign-off on those as well. We've also incorporated daily activity tracking to better match what employees are doing versus the activities that they're recording on their timesheet. To get a little bit in the weeds on, as an example, if someone's working on the Southwest Area Plan for an entire day, that falls under Task 7, our special projects. But if they mistakenly record that under long-range planning, we have the ability before they're signed off on to identify that and have that corrected. So we're actually reflecting on our timesheets the exact work that they're doing. And there were some issues in matching that into the city's PeopleSoft system as well. Indirect cost and staff services. This was actually probably the most simple one to address. There are some federal requirements as to how you calculate what's called an indirect cost. And for us, those were things like primarily the services that the city provides us, accounting, procurement, human resources, things like that. They originally calculated out and based on a percentage of our salaries, but the procedures that were followed to develop that weren't quite up to federal standards. So what we've done there is really just go through and eliminate that indirect cost rate. So basically everything that we get charged is a direct cost that gets ultimately billed to DOT. We eliminated that on July 1st of this year. If you recall, that was when we started our new contract with DOT. We really function off of the state's fiscal year as opposed to the federal and local fiscal year that everybody else has. We also will be looking to update our staff services agreement. The current one that we have expires, I believe it's in May of 2019. So part of that will include establishing some processes of documenting how those allocated costs are determined, and we would review those as part of the budget process every year that we complete in September. Invoices, this is item number 4, and this relates to an issue that we have had for a while in terms of timely submission and detailed documentation on our invoices to DOT. Basically, the recommendations from the OIG was to implement improved procedures, develop a process where they're done in a timely manner, and then working with staff members to make sure they're trained in these procedures. This is probably the one area that we've done the most work in on the last year and a half, again, with the Financial Services Department. The way the process works now is the invoices are developed by financial services staff. I review them, I develop the progress report and the documentation that's required to submit to DOT, and have the Financial Services Department review that prior to us sending it. And that was the big link that was missing before, was that lack of communication between our staffs and the Financial Services Department. Invoices are to be submitted within 45 days of the end of the quarter. Per our contract with DOT, that's actually a 90-day requirement, but we've established this 45-day requirement more so as a check on ourselves. I will tell you that for the first quarter of this new contract, we met that 45-day time frame, and that's actually with the hurricane thrown in there as well, so we were kind of happy about that one. This is probably the one that gave me the most heartburn when I originally saw it, and it was an item under question cost. And what the OIG found was that $19,000 in costs were incurred prior to the execution of the MPO agreement, $1,300 in costs without sufficient supporting documentation, and then really the only one that I was unaware of related to my car allowance. So we can talk about that for a second. But our response to those is when you look at the $19,000 in cost, they were incurred between July 16 and June of 2016, but were charged to the wrong contract that was effective July 1st of 2016. So they were all legitimate and allowable costs. They were just charged to the wrong contract. The $1,300 related to were personnel costs, again, that were related back to the timesheet issues that we talked about a few minutes ago. What we've done to deal with that, and we actually, this particular issue relates to the top line there, only occurs every 2 years, and that's when we transition from one contract to the new one. So this year what we did is we went through the expenditures, and the biggest thing that catches us, we of course are on a 2-week pay period. So if depending on where June 30th falls in that pay period, we have to make sure that we're extracting out those costs June 30 and prior versus having them picked up, let's say if the end of the pay period was July 5th, when we do our invoices, it actually keys off of that July 5th, so nobody was checking to make sure where those dates fell. But this year we made sure that we do that, and we've got a process in place to actually deal with that. In terms of my car allowance, apparently, unbeknownst to me, and I think 26 of my counterparts around the state, if we receive a car allowance, we're actually required to document our mileage, personal mileage versus our business mileage. So rather than having that administrative headache, what I'm going to recommend there is that we revise my contract to eliminate the car allowance and in essence roll in the amount that I get now, which is about $3,000 annually for the car allowance as part of my base salary.
When do you want to do that, Greg?
I'm sorry?
When do you want to do that?
I wanted to wait and bring it up today, and then if everybody's agreeable to that, I can bring the contract back at our next meeting.
Do you need a motion to do that, or do you need a motion to approve the contract right now?
Oh, we don't have the contract.
You want to wait?
Yeah,
I understand what I'm saying. Do you need a motion to bring it back?
I don't. You're going to do it as a motion? Okay.
so moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion
Too late.
made by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Merritt. Any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I fully support the motion on the table. Would the maker of the motion wrap in approval of this item? We need to accept the financial statements, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't know if we want to take that up as a separate item, but we could fold it into this motion.
I would think.
Separate.
Yeah, they're
Separate?
two
Okay.
separate issues,
Okay.
yeah.
I just wanted to check.
I'm sorry.
Yes, well, I just wanted to say that for the record here, I think it's important for us to reflect on these financial statements. If we don't see issues, often we don't make any comments about it. This particular financial statement, I don't want to compare it to any other organizations, but we've all seen those that have been through big transitions. I sit on the Planning Council board with Commissioner Merritt and others, and Chris Rito has gone through a major transition in recent years. And so I only say that because there are things that bubble up for a few years. We know that. But when I look at all of this, and I think you touched on it in each of your bullets there, the fact that this board made a huge change a few years ago, wanted to reorganize, and we've seen evidence of that with our staff throughout, and that you can say, Greg, that you all already took action on some of these things prior to us seeing the final audit, it really feels like we were on the right track and we are on the right track. And I just want to appreciate you and all of our staff for getting us there and getting ahead of these issues. Cleaning it up after someone else tells you there's a problem is one way to do it. I think we all much prefer you all to get ahead of them, and that's, I think, what I saw throughout the report. So thank you for that. The contract, and this is something that came out in briefings, my last comment, Mr. Chair, is just, I think with what you have learned and what we have extension learned through the discussion, that our audit may have some nuances in it that are unique to an MPO. And so as we move forward with the city contract, I just hope that we can have some discussion, or you can have some discussion with the city about that contract and make sure that we're in the right posture moving forward with the agency's involvement in that. So that would be it, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Clarify something real quick, and I just want to make sure everybody understood this point as it relates to the car allowance. That's issue related to the federal monies that we received. This would not apply to another agency, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to make sure that for any of my counterparts out there that get car allowances, this one in particular is tied back to the fact that we are funded through federal dollars.
Mr. Minor.
I've got some comments after Mr. Slade is done with his presentation on the audit. Are you finished, sir?
Okay, so your question on not this particular.
After Mr. Slade is done with this discussion topic, I'll have a comment.
All right, so all those in favor of, you know what? Yes.
Forgive me, I thought we were wrapping it up, so yes,
Are you
Mr. Chair.
done?
Well, no, we've actually got a couple.
This is
No,
the
we've got a
vote
couple
on
of
each
things to go
contract.
to.
That's what I'm asking right now. You got a comment on this?
No.
Okay. Any objections to the motion on the floor? Seeing none, we'll call it as approved.
The last item that we have is governance, and this is something that's been a focus, I think, of a lot of, especially at the federal level. And this is a particular topic that, thankfully, Joe Malashevsky, the city's new internal auditor, who just came to us from DOT's AOIG office, is going to kind of give you the 50,000-foot view on governance. And then I believe he's going to touch on a couple of the topics, Joe, correct, that they identified. And then I'll have a couple of bullets that we've done to address some of the issues identified there. So, Joe, with that.
So good afternoon again. My name is Joe Malashevsky. I'm the city auditor. I've had that privilege since about July of this year when the commission appointed me. And my responsibility this afternoon is to talk a little bit about the concepts of governance and internal controls, which are the topic of the DOT audit and, in part, the external audit as well. I did not audit or review the board's activities or the functions under the direction of Greg Slay. So these are not observations on my part of how well you're doing. They're talking in terms of concepts. So one of those key concepts is that we act as members of the board as stewards of public funds, that we provide oversight to the expenditure of those funds in a way that provides for both transparency of what we do and accountability for what we do. So I think we can all appreciate as public officials that that's a very important principle that we have to uphold. So the definition of governance, it's the combination of processes and structures that as a board you put into place to make sure that you're informed, that you direct the activities, manage them, and monitor them to ensure that the organization achieves the objectives that's established to meet. This concept of governance is very important because it affects everything the organization does. And if we fail at the level of governance, everything else will fail as well. So how many here are familiar with COSO?
Costco?
COSO. All right, so the DOT audit references COSO. That's the Committee on Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission. So nobody's familiar. Okay, so this organization was put together by 5 private sector organizations, primarily professional auditors and accountant types. They collectively represent over 600,000 professionals worldwide, and they were established back in 1985. Their original purpose was to study the causal factors for fraud in financial reporting. So through the years, COSO has provided a lot of thought leadership on topics like fraud, not just in financial statements, but in general, topics like risk management and internal controls. And that's one of the things that the audit speaks to. It references this document, Internal Controls and Integrated Framework. This is one of the publications from COSO. So in the DOT audit, they make observations that the board should strengthen governance over financial controls. And they make 8 related recommendations in the report. The first, that this board should review, receive, and discuss audit findings and related corrective actions. You're doing that today. And you're doing it in a very open and demonstrative way, and I think that's what the audit comment was looking for. The board should provide oversight to Greg. I know it's a task. He probably needs a lot of oversight, right? To make sure that he puts into place proper internal controls and that he takes proper corrective actions related to these types of audit findings. They recommend that you employ individuals with accounting and financial skills. So I think through the services agreement with the city, the approach might be to use the individuals that are already in the city that have those types of expertise and background. To periodically inquire on the state of the budget, and the City Commission as a whole looks at the budget quarterly and has done so for a few years. That's been well received by the City Commission. So if that's not a practice you're currently doing, that might be one you would think about. They recommend establishing an audit committee or a similar committee with the duties of an audit committee. So you have currently an executive committee. It could be duties that you add to that executive committee or establish a separate audit committee. And more related, I think, recommendations directed to Director Slay is to have position descriptions, particularly for those positions that are doing financial-related responsibilities, procedures, documenting the financial controls of the organization, and providing information to this board on matters of budget, whether there's any amendments needed, and the status of any corrective actions. So I've used that word internal control a lot. So this is what it is. It's closely related to governance. It's processes that are affected by people, board members, directors, and staff, to provide you reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of organizational goals, primarily in the 3 areas listed on the slide. That the operations of the organization are efficient and effective, that you have reliability in any financial and other types of reports that the board receives, and that the organization is compliant with any laws, rules, regulations, and contractual provisions. For us audit geeks, this COSO cube is iconic, and on the face of it, we have the 5 components of internal control that we look for in any organization when we do an audit. We look for the organization to establish a proper control environment, to understand the risks that face the organization and manage those risks within your risk appetite, to implement necessary control activities, to keep information and communications flowing throughout the organization and up to the governing board, and to have monitoring activities both at the management level and these type of external audits that provide information to you about how things are going. The framework breaks down the 5 components into 17 principles. You'll thank me for not going into all of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I will say that the control environment component is broken down into 5 principles. The first 2 are relevant here, that the organization demonstrate a commitment to integrity and ethical values, and that the board of directors demonstrate independence from management and provides oversight into the development of internal controls, particularly over financial matters. In the framework they publish, it goes deeper. So for that first principle, establishing a commitment to integrity and ethical values, they provide certain focal points. They say that the organization should set a proper tone at the top, establish standards of conduct, evaluate adherence to that standard of conduct, and then take timely action if there are any deviations. So the framework provides similar type of guidance throughout the 17 principles that are in the framework. These are the things that auditors look at when they come into your organization to see if you have these things in place. Some examples of internal control activities: proper authorization and approval of any business transactions of the organization, review of operational performance periodically, supervision of the activities, control over access to resource, records, and information, any reconciliations and verifications, as well as regular reviews of processes and activities like these audits that you've received today. So there's lots of benefits to internal controls. They ensure that business is transacted properly, hopefully the first time. They reduce the opportunity for fraud, waste, and abuse within organizations. They protect elected and appointed officials as well as employees from personal liability. And they provide for a positive public image for organizations through reduction of errors, fraud, and mismanagement within organizations. So the audit speaks to the oversight role for financial responsibilities. And so these are some of the things that it's referencing. That the organization should have a clearly stated mission, vision, goals, and priorities, and that creates the foundation from which you provide financial oversight over the organization. That all board members should have a basic understanding of the financial position of the organization, and that financial position shouldn't be exclusive knowledge to a handful of board members or members of the management team. Having full disclosure will lead to the board-based decisions for financial matters being well informed. So the board is responsible for ensuring that financial decision-making aligns with the strategies that you've adopted. And the concept here of oversight boards, noses in, fingers out.
That just doesn't sound right.
Well, it doesn't
Just
sound
switch
right,
the
right?
words
But
around.
so as a board member in an oversight role, your nose should be all up in Greg Slay's business, right? But you got to keep your fingers out. You've hired him to administer the programs under his direction, and that's his responsibility. But you work together and appreciate each other's roles. The board's for oversight and his for administration.
Joe, I think you may want to work on that analogy a little bit.
Yeah. Take the fingers and noses out of it.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I like the concept. I don't know.
This was pretty nice. I tell you.
All right, so I come from the state university system where boards of trustees and board of governors like to really focus in on what universities should be doing, and having that separation is really important in that environment. So as a board member, you all act as a fiduciary. That's a special relationship. You have responsibility for oversight over the assets of the organization. It can be either a legal or ethical obligation as a fiduciary, It's a trust. So you have to take prudent action over the resources of the organization. And that means following several duties. The fiduciary duties are care, loyalty, and obedience. So the duty of care is that you should act in good faith, exercising proper skill, care, and diligence that a prudent person would do under similar circumstances. Care means you attend meetings, you come prepared, you're informed on issues, you vote, you abstain when you have a conflict, and you seek guidance from your counsel when you're unsure of proper protocol or whether or not you have a conflict. The duty of loyalty is to act in good faith, to ensure that you act in the interests of the organization and not in your private or personal interest. And finally, the duty of obedience. And this is kind of an offshoot of the duty of care. It's to act in good faith, to direct the organization to the furtherance of its mission, to avoid mission creep of the organization, and remain compliant and obedient with all laws, rules, and regulations. So if you don't act in good faith in exercising the fiduciary duties of care, loyalty, and obedience, then you can take on personal liability, something certainly no one would want to do. So we have to be careful not to breach these duties out of self-interest. Not sure what happened to that slide. So I'll end on this. Public service is a public trust. Your participation, your insight, and your engagement as a decision maker on the board is essential to the organization fulfilling its public purpose and making appropriate use of public funds. So the audit spoke to governance and internal controls. I hope I gave you a good overview of kind of where auditors come from on those types of topics, and hopefully you found it informative.
Riveting presentation.
Thank you. People usually stand at this point, clap.
Oh, yeah.
I love our auditor presentation.
I'm awake again.
We need our own auditor.
I'm sorry.
We'll call it now.
Be happy to come back and do it again anytime.
We'll call you.
I'll wait.
What would our board be without you, Randy?
I tell you, I don't know.
I still say noses out. Noses in, fingers out is pretty cool.
And
I have...
to go back real quick, just a couple of other items. And Joe touched on a couple of these in his presentation, so I just want to kind of jump to the end on this. Okay. And talk about some of the things that we've done, again, to address some of these. One of the things they talked about in both audits was the need for the CRTPA to add someone onto staff with financial capabilities. That's something that we've put in a deadline of March 31st of next year to assess. I believe between the services that the Financial Services Department provides, as well as the experience that I've had with this, I don't think that we need to add staff to handle this particular aspect of it. But that gives us about 6 months under the processes and procedures we have in place to assess that. Of course, we will continue to work with financial services to improve what we're doing. There's always room for improvement in any of these. And then the other thing they talked about, and Joe referenced, is like a quarterly budget report. And in front of you here, we've actually developed a couple of them for you to review today. The one in green is our PL budget, and that's in essence our day-to-day functioning budget. At the bottom, you'll see a note as to when the invoice was submitted to DOT and then when we were reimbursed for that. And then the second page in blue, that's our consultant budget summary. Those are basically the planning projects that we have either ongoing or upcoming over the next couple of years. And the same at the bottom with that as well, that showed when we submitted for reimbursement on that and when we were reimbursed. So that, I think, gives you probably the best kind of snapshot, at least on a quarterly basis, of where we are in the budget. There's also a column there that shows you how much of a particular budget that we use for that period. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I believe that's all that I had, but we will need an approval or an acceptance of the 2017 financial statement.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion to accept has been made by Commissioner Merritt, seconded by Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Minor's been chomping at the bit.
He loves this stuff.
Yeah, he loves it. Commissioner Minor, you have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Director Slade, thank you very much for all your work on this. This is my first meeting on the CRTPA as a board member, and so I don't have the historical knowledge that many other of the folks here do. But I do know that the CRTPA has undergone quite a bit of change, and it's always difficult, especially when an audit comes around, assessing the changes that have taken place since that time. So I commend you for your work. This audit, though, does have some material weaknesses and significant deficiencies that we have to take into account. And as a board, it's incumbent upon us to provide oversight and to do whatever we can as a board to make sure that a year from now, we don't have an audit that has a similar type of result. So, and this is not meant to diminish Director Slay or any of the efforts that have been undertaken. Please don't misunderstand me on that. What I do want to do, though, as a board, is make sure that we are providing appropriate oversight to make sure we can take corrective actions working with Director Slay so that we don't have an audit like this next year. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is I've been through this myself. You know, I've been on the receiving end of single audits. I've drafted my own management responses to auditors' results. So, I mean, I know what it's like, and I do know that it'd be helpful for us as a board to be able, midway through, to take a look at where CRTPA is on these management responses, get an update 6 months from now, say, on where those responses are going. So that if Director Slade does need some additional staff, if he does need some additional help on these management responses, we have time to get him that help in time to show improvement to the auditors for the next audit. So with that, what I'd like to do is have a motion to present to us in March or April of 19 a status report on the management responses in these audits so that we can see how the progress is going. A lot of these management responses have already been written. Some of them are still under development, but what I'd like to do in May or April is see where we are on those, see what the progress has been on those responses since today, and then take appropriate measures.
I'll second that.
Well,
Motion's already been made in second. Commissioner Richardson.
There's a
would you
motion on
accept
the
that?
floor.
Yes. Commissioner Richardson, would you accept that as a amendment to your motion?
I would. I mean, I'm not sure we need a motion. I think if we direct staff, but if you want to include it in a motion, I'm okay with that.
I mean,
That's completely up to you all.
I'll leave it up to the attorney anyway.
Yeah, we'll include it in the motion, Mr. Chairman. We're
Okay.
good.
We'll go include. So the motion reflects acceptance of the audit with a 6-month update coming
Right.
back in April of
Management response.
management response. And you said management response, correct?
Yes, basically a progress report on each of the management responses within the audit.
All right. Anything else, Commissioner?
No, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
sir. I have Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to personally commend, I want to call you Greg. I'll say
Call me
Mr.
Greg.
Slay.
Call me Greg. We like keeping it informal.
Okay. And the staff for what they've done and having the history of coming on board with the previous administration and knowing where we have come from since then. And much of this is a response to that time. Greg has done a phenomenal job of moving this agency forward and truly making it accomplish the mission. I have unquestioned confidence in Greg and him implementing the recommendations that were brought forward. But you know, it is our responsibility for oversight, and so I appreciate, because you all are new, you're wanting that report. But I commend Greg and his staff for the work that they've done, and feel comfortable knowing that these issues, even before it came to us, were already being addressed. And so we just, in 6 months, Greg would want to see where you are and what your recommendations, if any, are at that time for us to take action.
And I think that, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think that goes back directly to what Joe talked about in the governance part. No, I don't have an issue at all with that.
Right. And then just finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Joe for the presentation that he gave, because when I came on board, I was the only one. And so I didn't have the privilege of that kind of, it wasn't riveting, Randy, as you say.
I think it was riveting.
But I didn't have the advantage of having that kind of presentation when I came on board, and I hope that those of you who are new, that it has been beneficial to you in understanding your role and responsibility as a board member, and that you will, take what we've heard here today seriously, because it is a serious matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I have Commissioner Dozier, I have Commissioner Merritt, and Commissioner Matlow in queue to speak. I don't know which one of y'all put your cards up first.
Yeah, I did.
I was listening, Rick. I was right, okay. Commissioner Dozier, you have the floor.
Commissioner Matlow, you got to watch that one. Just letting you know. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I did not mean to jump ahead of the end of the presentation. I'm going to circle back to that in a second. So my comments that I mentioned a moment ago would have been more germane to this part. So right posture on separating the motions. Commissioner Richardson, I agree with everything you said. I would just add one piece of it that, first, Joe, it's nice to hear an auditor give a presentation that doesn't include numbers. So you all do a lot more than that, and I think this was good. And this is the part that I would add. Let's be blunt. We've all started to sit around the table. I am thrilled to have so many new colleagues at this table, but we're all dealing with something where even people who should have known better perhaps didn't. So it's a good reminder for those of us who've been sitting here a long time and new members. That's the only thing. I think keeping fresh about these things is good for all of us. And with that, since the transition that Commissioner Richardson, you spoke about, I really want to recognize how engaged this board has been. And I'm really excited about our 4 new members joining us. Not really that new. Yes. You've been here, and yeah. So 3 new members. The way we understand this material, the way it's presented to us, makes a difference in our level of engagement. And that has improved incredible. While all the internal controls are being updated and changed, the way we dialogue about these issues, the way we understand them, because this is complicated. And not all commissioners want to sit at this table. This is really getting down in the minutia, right? So I love this board because we've got a group that has been really interested and engaged, and I think that has worked in tandem with our staff in recent years as we've moved through this transition. I think the 6-month update is great. Anything on governance there is good, so thank you for that, Commissioner Minor. But I am confident, as Commissioner Richardson said, that a lot of these things have been addressed already. That was my comments before. But I do like the idea of staying up to date with it, because if something else comes out, say the staff issue that you're going to look at before the end of March, we need to be in the right posture to look at that and to provide assistance and oversight when needed. So I just wanted to compliment our staff with that, but also focus more on what our role is, and that was a good way to tee it up. So thank you, Joe. This is going to be good. Last thing is, if we do our job well on governance here, we get more money for our region for roads. And for part of that history, Commissioner Minor, that you mentioned, one of the things that really stood out to those of us who were, and Commissioner Richardson and Merritt, we were on that hiring committee, was that we were leaving a lot of money on the table because we may not be coordinating and communicating as much. So when we sit at the blueprint table, there's so much more coordination now, and that's really exciting. So this isn't just a governance and control, but this is benefit for the community of the region. Thank you.
Commissioner Merritt.
Just, I want to relay an experience. I'm the chair of the Planning Council. I've been 4 years now. It was in a whole lot worse shape than this group was during the transition. Some of the items you said weren't there were there in that one. And I can tell you, and Chris would probably agree to this, I think a key is a strong executive committee, because as far as oversight goes, it's hard for a group that meets twice a month to have any real oversight. And the executive committee meets all the time with Chris. If he has a decision that needs to be made, they'll call the executive committee. Now, I know in our case, we have an executive committee. I think it's chair, past chair, and vice chair.
Vice chair, yes, sir.
But those positions rotate around once a year. And just, I'm not going to make a motion at this time, but let's just think about having a more stable executive committee, whatever it may be, a small county, a city, and a county representative. that are there for at least 2 or 3 years. And I know that's been very helpful for Chris. If we'd have rotated in and out once a year, it's hard to establish a relationship. He calls me all the time about stuff. You know, our executive committee voted to give him a bonus this year for Christmas.
I just found out.
We can do that. We can do that. Our board gave the executive committee full power, and I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just thinking I'd like y'all to think about that, because we have been through a similar situation, well, actually a lot worse financial situation and management situation. Our audits were, that would have been a great one, right, Chris?
I'll just jump in really fast. Randy's exactly correct. The executive committee for the Appalachian Regional Planning Council for us is the stability that it's brought, the oversight, and being nimble and being able to meet on if I need something, some business that can't wait, I can bring the executive committee together. You know, Kristen's on our executive committee as well. It has really stabilized and brought that fiduciary responsibility back into our organization.
Because we have, I don't know how many, we got 9 member counties, but there probably as many, if not a little more than members in this group, but it's hard to get people to come to the meeting. It's just hard to be engaged when you only meet once every 2 months. You're not going to be engaged, and I'm not saying anybody should be, I like the noses out part. I don't like the finger being thrown in there with it, but we shouldn't be directing Greg what to do every day, obviously, but having somebody to bounce things off of, I think, has been immensely helpful for Chris. Just something to think about.
Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question about the timeline of the new policies you put in place. You said March would be about 6 months of the new?
Yes, sir. That was directed more at the procedures we have of developing the invoices and things like that. And that would give us, again, like I mentioned, our fiscal year technically functions July 1 to June 30th. So that would give us 2 billing, really almost 3 billing cycles to kind of assess where we are. And that was directed more so at the need to bring on additional financial staff with financial experience.
Okay, and with that time frame, would we be seeing the same material weaknesses in a 2018 audit if they weren't in place yet?
That's a very good question. Most of this, I would say, especially as it relates to the invoicing and stuff, we probably got that squared away in the April through June time frame. That will definitely impact some of 2018. How they ultimately document that as part of the audit, I think we just have to wait and see when we got the audit. But they will show up. But I think at the same time, I would assume it will be noted that improvements have been made to address that.
Okay. And to Commissioner Minor's point, so 2019 would be the first complete year of the new policies and new directives?
I would say half of it, because remember, we're working on fiscal year, which would be from September of 17 to October of 18, so roughly half of that year.
Okay.
There's a little bit of overlap where, and like I said, technically we function on the state's fiscal year, but administratively we're on the city's. I have to stop and think when I talk about quarters and stuff, but there'll be some overlap. So I think, I will tell you now for the 2018 audit, there will be some note. Whether or not it's identified as a material weakness or whatever, I'm not sure. But again, I think there'll be documentation that shows that we've addressed the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Any other speakers?
Mr. Chairman, if I could real quick,
Yes,
I just want to take this opportunity to thank Joe for his assistance in this matter, but I really want to thank Patrick Twyman and his staff at Financial Services. They have worked a lot with us over the last year trying to straighten a lot of this out. Rusty Robbins, who's our assigned accountant, has been great. So it's really a lot of the success that we've had in addressing this is due to their assistance. So I really want to thank them for their assistance in all of this.
All right, anything else? Motion on the floor is to accept the audit with the amendment made by Commissioner Minor to have an update come back in 6 months. That's in April. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. We go now to 7B.
This would be, I believe, Brian Paulk is going to give us all an overview of the tentative draft work program. We sent the citizens plans out to you all about 2 or 3 weeks ago, kind of outlining and identifying some of the additional projects that have been put in the work program. So with that, Brian?
Mr. Chairman, I haven't been through these before, excuse me. I would humbly ask the DOT representative, you don't have to go over every road in every county.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I have an equally riveting presentation about the Department's work program.
8 of these also, so you don't have to go over every road if you don't want to.
Well, let's make sure our new commissioners are
Yeah,
comfortable
they
with
need
that, too.
Just do it in Tallahassee.
Are you guys okay with that? Okay.
Actually, I was not going to do that. No, I did want to say that you did have your citizens' plans for all 4 counties in the CRTPA region. That does show all the projects that are within the respective counties. At this point in time, I'd just like to go over a couple of new projects in the respective counties, but as always, we can discuss these projects or any projects that are in the reports. And just real quickly, also we had a new all-system bridge project in Leon County off on Miccosukee Road. We were fortunate we were able to add 3 new bike path and trail projects, 2 in Wakulla County, 1 on Bloxham Cutoff. We were able to add design in the new 5th year, and then 1 along US 98 from Woodwell Highway to Lighthouse Road. The construction of that has been programmed in the new 5th year. And finally, a new bike path project in Jefferson County along US 19 from David Road to Waukena Highway. This shows the PD&E being programmed in fiscal year 21 with design out in fiscal year 23. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Richardson.
thank you, Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman.
Bibisi. I'm sorry, Commissioner Richardson.
Can you tell me where we are with Orange Avenue from Capitol Circle Southwest to South Adams?
Just taking over this role again, sorry, unfortunately, I am not up to speed on the majority of the projects here, but I can get you an update on that.
If you would. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bibisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are some projects that I would like to add, since this is a tentative work program, because looking at that packet, I could not resist looking how shortlisted the Gaston County programs were on that particular, on all of the counties. So I will suggest that we consider, if possible, to add some of these projects that I have determined through conversation with my fellow commissioners and through talking with some people in my county, Gaston County. I think I mentioned the bike path in the last workshop we had a few days or a week or so ago. Let us look at the Leon County, Gaston County bike trail connectivity along Highway 90 up to Chattahoochee, or at least up to Quincy. And the Leon County, Gaston County bike trail connectivity along 27 from Leon County to Havana. If we can look at those, they are not in the work in the tentative work program. But I will suggest that we consider adding those to the Gaston County projects, and then the others will be these other ones are already in, I think, in one of the long-term work program, but I don't know how soon they are. I've got to go back to look at the discussions that we have had. Side work along Post Plant Road and St. Hebron Road. We need to seriously look at those, because those roads, pedestrian safety is of great concern right now. St. Hebron Road is connecting Point Milligan, which is up for resurfacing, and possibility of adding shoulders from Point Milligan to Fontana Trail. Fontana Trail is where Gaston County is currently in the process of building the first park and recreation complex. So there's going to be heavy foot traffic along St. Hebron Road, and we need that. We need sidewalk built there. And then Post Plant Road is the connectivity between Point Milligan and State Road 12. And that is where we also have one of our major dump sites. So with Hurricane Michael, there has been tremendous heavy truck traffic. And when this trucks are coming through, citizens have to step in the gutter or jump over the gutter because there is no place for them to walk on. So we need to consider those. And then the other project I'm looking at that I think we need to consider is a replacement or the repair of the Atapagos Bridge on Atapagos Road, which is one of the roads that is up for resurfacing. And in 2020, this bridge is next to BASF. FDOT on their last inspection determined that this particular bridge has a lot of structural stress and deficiencies. And I actually, on the day that I volunteered with the public work, that happened to be the day that they decided to go do some plastering and some cleaning of the waterways and all. So I actually saw those stress factors myself and actually put plasters in some of those cracks and the foundation of the bridge, Atapagos Bridge. So if we can really seriously consider adding these projects to these projects to the tentative work program, or I really don't, it does not really matter whether whichever program they fit into, whether it's SCAP, whether it's LAP, whether it's TAP, SCRAP, or SCOPE. It doesn't really matter as long as they are done expeditiously and they are done considered with a good sense of urgency. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Now, you need to define what expeditious is.
Expeditious, human expeditious, not budgetary expeditious, so to speak.
Or road project
Or road project
expeditious.
expeditious, yes.
There's such thing as expeditious.
Right.
I have no motion on the floor. I have Commissioner Dozier.
You don't need a
I'll
motion.
make a motion for staff recommendation.
No
Actually,
no
on this
action
one,
needs to be
there's
taken.
no
on
action.
It's under action items.
Actually, we would like a motion of support.
So
for
moved.
this.
Motion made by Commissioner Dozier, seconded by Commissioner Merritt.
All right. Just
You need to call for the vote.
two quick questions here, Mr. Chair. One is that we've got a lot of overlap for different things. I'm pretty sure we had some conversation about the airport, freight logistics, or foreign trade zone, things like that. But I might be conflating that with some blueprint conversation as well. The freight logistics zone, Gaston County, Gulf County to Gaston County, is very significant, and it is referenced in our work plan here, and it's something that the Regional Planning Council has been working on. I'm just wondering if this board has an appetite for an update on something like that so that we know enough to see if and when opportunities arise that we could support those efforts. So I want to toss that out as a suggestion. I'm not sure, Greg, if you have any thoughts about that, if anybody else on the board. But I think we're getting to a point where there could be a lot more synergy and collaboration, as I referenced before. And in the economic development end, that's not something we've necessarily looked at as heavily as just coordination with other agencies and things like that. So if there's an appetite for that, I'll leave that at the discretion. I'm not sure if it needs to be part of the motion.
So we can, if it's what the board would like to see, I can work with
Mr. Chair?
Chris and we can.
Consensus on that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you for that. And secondly, Commissioner Villalobos, I hear you when you're going through those different projects, and I am quite sure our chair might mention MPOAC towards the end.
Yes.
So I'm going to leave that for you. This is a complicated structure process, as we know really well. Are those projects that Dr. V just mentioned, do we need to have any action, or is that just staff looking at them, DOT and?
Are they on the long-term plan, first of all? Are they on the TIP?
That's kind of where I'm asking Commissioner Merritt, is kind of what the posture is. I didn't want the comment to just sit, but it may be a way of reminding ourselves what the process is as well, right?
I think most of the ones that Dr. VBCA described are more so in the scrap and the SCOP realm, and then some off-system bridge improvements. Those typically aren't ones that we have dealt with in the regional mobility plan because they don't I don't like this term, they don't rise to that scale. I mean, we're more interested in capacity projects and things like that. But I think one of the things I will note, if you look at the district's work program throughout the entire district, especially when you look at that fifth year, it is extremely lean. I think DOT is going through one of those cycles now where construction costs are rising. That's definitely impacting projects that are in the pipeline. We were lucky, in talking to some of my counterparts around the state, they're seeing deletions of projects out of the work program. We have yet to see that. We did have one deferral this year, I believe, on Capitol Circle that got deferred out a year. So, looking around the state, what other people are facing, I'd be happy with just a single deferral. But I do think it is worth noting that this is an extremely lean work program throughout the entire district, and that reflects some of the issues, or I think probably the primary issue that the department's having overall, and just lack of funding.
Well, I appreciate you going into that, Greg. It's something you mentioned in briefing, just the kind of projecting forward. Again, I think this is one more indication of longer-term planning, not in the structure necessarily, but just general looking at the signs here. But it also goes to what Commissioner Richardson just said, that expeditious has a different meaning in transportation funding than it might in other areas, right? So good comment, Commissioner Richardson, and I think we got to reflect on that, but posturing ourselves well and seeing those trends is going to be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have Commissioner Vice Chair Viabisi. Commissioner Richardson, any other commissioners like to speak? All right, I'm going to round out the discussion with Commissioner Richardson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wait. Got to be first.
Oh.
I was going to round it out with you.
Oh, round it out with me. Okay.
Yes, in response to Commissioner Merritt's comment, the sidewalk on Post Plant ends in Hebron Road are actually in the long-term plan. And so that is there, I know that, but I want that, if we can bump that up, that would be, that is my definition, my reference to expeditious. And, and with regards to Point Milligan and Point Milligan Road and the Ottapogos Road resurfacing, I'm going to suggest that when I looked at the work program, there is no indication in it that there is going to be shoulders. They just said resurfacing in 2020, and I'm going to request strongly that in the design phase, that the county be very much a part of it, because I want shoulders added to that resurfacing, so that pedestrians, when they are walking and traffic is coming, they have to step off the road and step into the grass on both of those roads. So I'm going to suggest that during the design phase, the county is involved, and shoulders are included on those roads that are off for 2020 resurfacing.
Is that a scrap project?
They are in the work program right now.
But I mean, it's an off-state highway, right?
Yeah, they are off. Both of them are off.
Every time we do a scrap project too, we try to squeeze enough money to widen the road.
Okay.
Commissioner Richardson?
Just a quick question, Mr. Chair. In light of, the impact of Hurricane Michael, I know there is significant infrastructure damage in the western part of the state where the hurricane came through. Greg, do you have any idea of how that's going to impact, at this point, funding for, infrastructure projects in light of all of the repair that's going to have to be done in that area?
I have not had that specific conversation, but I'd ask Brian or someone to maybe, if they want to at least kind of give a general description.
In fact, our district secretary was asked that same question at a previous TPO meeting. At this point, the funds from the general revenue are being considered to cover the hurricane impacts. However, our Transportation Trust Fund is always out there as a target for any financial needs related to transportation impacts. So we're hoping that the trust fund remains whole, but that is always an option for the legislature.
Wasn't there some talk of using some Triumph money also in some of this?
I've not heard that, but I'm not really up on Triumph.
I think the commissioner's question's a little bit different. I think what you're referring to is the upcoming legislative session. and potential raids on the trust fund.
Right.
I believe his question was more so how much has the damage from the hurricane impacted, I guess, the overall budget of District 3.
Right.
Does that make?
Well, it does, and we've covered those needs. We have a tremendous amount of debris removal contracts out there, but even though it's within District 3, it's still covered or looked at from a statewide basis. So we have not had a direct dollar-for-dollar impact in District 3.
So you don't anticipate at this point that any projects that are in our work plan would be deferred in light of funding going west?
At this point in time, we've not been notified of the need to defer any projects.
Okay, perfect.
Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was it.
Motion on the floor is for approval of the plan. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, no objection. Next item.
Next item is approval of the 2019 meeting calendar.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve has been made by Commissioner Merritt, seconded by Commissioner Richardson. Any objection? Motion carries without objection.
The next up is the election of a chair and vice chair. Of course, Commissioner Maddox is our current chair. Dr. V is our vice chair. So with that,
Commissioner Richardson.
Chairman, I'd like to nominate Dr. Via BCA as the incoming chair of the CRTPA
Second.
board.
Motion been made by Commissioner Richardson and Dr. Via BCB, our chair for the upcoming year. I will second that motion.
I already did.
I can choose second myself. Commissioner Merritt. Commissioner Merritt seconds the motion. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. Dr. V?
Motion for vice chair?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to nominate Commissioner Randy Merritt as our next vice chair.
Commissioner Via BC makes a motion for Commissioner Merritt for vice chair. Motion been seconded. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Dozier.
Quick question.
Yes.
I am absolutely fine ditching, I don't know if this was policy or just how we operated, but I wouldn't mind some clarity on this. I seem to remember it being rotated, city, Tallahassee, Leon, and one of the 3 partner counties as we go. I believe that it may be time to reflect on that. I'm not sure it matters who is our chair and vice chair at that point, but for the fact that if we have an executive committee that doubles as an audit committee, the structure we have right now for leadership would mean that the chair, vice chair, and past chair represent Leon, Tallahassee, and one of the other 3
That's why I
counties.
suggested a different format for the
Okay.
executive committee.
I am fine either way. I think just going forward, this is a change. It's a change I'm open to, but I think we all need to reflect on that, and I wouldn't mind hearing if it is a policy or if it was just our way of doing things.
actually, Jack and I had that very conversation the other day. It is not policy.
Right.
It has been practice.
Okay.
So
So for those new members, you understand exactly the conversation we're having here? Usually,
Of course.
Yes, okay.
Fully.
Good. All right.
It's not rocket science here, right? Commissioner Williams Cox, yeah.
We were talking about, I was like, wait, did we talk about it? But it's true. So any other discussion on it?
I fully support Commissioner Merritt, but I do think we need to have the discussion about the committee, which you teed up earlier. I'm not sure if more than a year is possible for us to be appointed to that committee, but whether we talk about it today or maybe get something from staff on how a new executive plus, or I don't think we can call it executive at that point, but or executive plus committee could be structured, I would love to see that at our next meeting.
it would necessitate a change in our bylaws to either expand that committee or establish a new one. So we definitely could not do that today, but we could most certainly come back with some options as to how to either restructure, and maybe at the board's pleasure, that may be the way to do it, is one option being restructuring the executive committee or establishing a separate audit/finance committee. We could most certainly bring back some options on either of those.
The last I'm sorry, Mr.
You need a
Chair.
motion for that? No?
That's up to you all. I typically, if
motions?
nobody's
It's
objecting.
All right, Commissioner Dozier.
The last comment I'll make on this is that, again, I'm going to support the motion. Commissioner Merritt, you've done it before. You'll do a great job. I have no doubt. But I do think it's important to reflect on the list that's in our agenda item going forward, and I would love one of our new members, and particularly from the city, to have a role in the future, because this will be several years without a city presence on the leadership team. So I just wanted to mention that for my city colleagues, new and old. Yes.
Richardson was the chair before.
Yeah.
Was the chair, I'm projecting forward, I'm sorry. That, 2-3 years from now, yes, Commissioner Richardson just did his stint. I just wanted to give that to my city colleagues, that it is on my mind, and I think rotating had some benefits, but we don't have to stick to it. Thank you.
Lots of yes and buts, but I understand.
It's just a little more complicated, but it's a good transition, good discussion to have.
Well, again, the Regional Planning Council is a little different. I've been the chair for 4 years. I just got reelected again for 2 more years. So different boards just operate different ways, and I think the way of rotating around is just to make people feel good.
Yeah, we don't
That's all it is.
We did have a good thing going, though. I mean, it was easy. I did like that, but we can have some more conversation about it, and hopefully come to some conclusions when staff brings it back.
Yeah.
Any more conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner Merritt being our vice chair indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. We'll move now to item E, 7E. Additional fee request from Thomas Howell Ferguson, PA.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is an item for approval. In early November, we received invoice from Thomas Howell Ferguson, our audit company, seeking additional fees for out-of-scope work and additional services. Those are outlined in your agenda memo. They relate to increased work due to the OIG audit, as well as some assistance provided to reconcile amounts on our CFA schedule, which are federal awards, and then some various items throughout that. So staff is recommending approval of this item. I think I'd still need to have some conversations with Thomas and Howell, but I am recommending approval at the amount listed of, I just lost it, $44,374.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion for this amount as the cap. I believe, Greg, you've done a good job kind of really digging in and assessing why this happened and the numbers, and if you can reduce it any further, I think that would be fantastic. But we had this conversation, so as a cap, not to exceed, but if we can get it lower, that's great. And I just wanted to say that my comment earlier about the audit contract going forward and making sure that any unique elements for an MPO are highlighted as we go forward with our city partners on that contract, that we look at that. It was in reference to this item as much as the financial audit before. Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Chair. Thank you.
Motion made by Commissioner Dozier, seconded by Vice Chair Viabisi.
I just wanted to mention to Commissioner Dozier's point, that is some conversation Joe and I have actually had about as they go through developing their RFP.
Fantastic.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
I just wanted to add that, and I understand what happened here, but in the future, if there are going to be some costs outside of what we had anticipated, that we know before we receive a final bill that this is going to occur, and why, what were the reasons. Also, prior to them doing the work, perhaps letting us know that if they do this out-of-scope work, this will be the cost, so you have an opportunity to say to move forward or not move forward, that kind of thing. I don't like getting a bill after I think I know what I'm supposed to be paying, to only find out that they did some additional work without talking with me first to get approval for this. But of course, we have a bill we must pay, but we don't want to make this a habit.
Yes, ma'am, and we've had that very conversation.
Executive Committee again.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have Commissioner Richardson and Commissioner Minor.
Yeah, and that was the very conversation that Greg and I had when he brought this to my attention, Commissioner Williams-Cox, and it gave me pause, and I'm even sitting here now debating on what my vote will likely be. I mean, I understand that we've got a bill that we have to pay, but I did not like the process at all by which this occurred. I think that staff should have been consulted if there was going to be a cost overrun, and then, we'd be given an opportunity to make the decision as to how we would approach that. So, you know, this time around, I would support it so that we can, you know, dispense with the issue, but I would hope that, Greg, this wouldn't happen again.
I would agree.
Yeah. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, it's not uncommon for an auditor to request additional fees for an audit. You know, cost overruns happen. You know, you come across a couple of hiccups in the process, and it burns a lot of staff time. But one thing, and I don't know if this rises to a level of emotion, but I do know that with the end of this audit, we have I think one more year for a contract before a new audit contract is issued. Is that correct?
Yes.
What I'd like to, this may not be a motion, but what I'd like to do is in that new contract that we formulate, we require a written request for any cost overruns other than what was approved for the audit itself. And what we could do probably to make it easier for Director Slay is maybe give him approval to make his own decision up to a certain amount, maybe $10,000 above what was agreed to for the cost of the audit. Anything above that would need to come to the board for approval and possibly have the auditors come and explain what they intend to do. So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Merritt, I had one question, I guess a couple of questions before I recognize you there. I don't think, I mean, I'm over an organization. I don't think this is normal. This is not normal practice, is it? I mean, to do work without, to go over a budget by that much without at least reaching out to the CEO of an organization to see if that is okay. Is that something that's...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to request cost overruns more than what the audit was expected to cost, but I think it is unusual to present a client with a bill after the fact.
Right, right. This is what I'm saying. So, I mean, a bill after the fact is more what I'm talking about. I mean, if you would have gotten that bill and been able to give consent or not prior to them doing the work, I would imagine that is normal. But to get it after the fact, I think that, to me, that's just not normal. Commissioner Dozier, are you on point?
Just on point, Mr. Chair. Forgive me, Commissioner Merritt. The reason why I keep coming back to the city contract is not to highlight any deficiencies within the city contract. This may be one of these legacy things that we're dealing with. This is kind of my read on this, that CRTPA's audit has been handled within the city contract, and my understanding is that the new shop, I should say, would be managing that audit more day-to-day than our CRTPA staff. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So I have wondered, and the reason why, Commissioner Richardson, I have heartburn about this as well. I think we all do, and we've certainly heard it from Greg, that this is something that can be addressed going forward, but there was no provision, I understand, that required notice to be made, even if it should be practiced. So just to lean in a little bit more on that contract piece, that's why I'm wondering if an outside agency may be handled a little different within the city contract going forward, or a particular agency like ours. So again, that's not a criticism on the city contract by any stretch. It's just that it's unique with an outside agency. Forgive me, Mr. Chair, but that's kind of, I think this is a little different, unique situation perhaps.
Commissioner Merritt, thank you for those on points.
Just to be clear, Greg, they handed you the audit, and they said, oh, by the way, it cost more than we thought it would? Did they ask you, Greg, can we spend these extra hours?
No, we got the invoice after the fact.
Okay. Then the point I was going to make about the executive committee doesn't apply, because, like I said,
Well,
our auditor, they just come after it's done and say, oh, by the way, it cost more than we said it was.
Right.
That wouldn't go over
And I think, like I said, as Commissioner Minor said, it's not unusual to have small things, but one of this magnitude.
Because I see in the past, it was at least $20,000 a year that they went over every year, correct?
Right, and that was the big question in my mind. If you look at the summary, we had ran somewhere in the upper 200 range of hours, and this year we went from the upper 200s to 636. That's a tremendous amount.
And was that because of the additional audit, or?
Well, no, partly, and then there were some issues. They're kind of outlined, or they are outlined there in the bullet points as part of the invoice. So they did document the reasons for it.
But it did more than double.
Yes, sir.
Almost triple.
Double plus.
It did. I don't think I don't think the cost there is unjustified, given the extra amount of work that was done. It's more of a principle thing of, if you're going to do that extra work, ask me about it first, or tell me what rate I'm getting it at, prior to me having a bill that I got to pay for.
You don't hire a framer to frame a house, and you get a price, and you come, the guy is done and says, oh, by the way, it costs double what I told you it would.
Right. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the contract for auditor services. If you look at Section 6, I don't think all you have it, but it's Section 6.4. In the event of request for other services, the contractor shall provide a written description of the services to be provided and a written estimate of the cost for those services. So it looks like a written estimate of the services, in addition to the audit cost, is required.
To be provided. That, to me, means before they do the work.
In the event of a request for other services, the contractor shall provide a written description of the services to be provided and a written estimate of the cost for those services.
But you didn't do that.
We did not get that.
We did not get that. I mean, those are the facts. I mean, we all know we did not get
I'm going to approve it, but let them know of my personal displeasure.
The only question I have is, Commissioner Dozier brought up a good point about the city side of it. They would have come to you instead of someone at the city to get that approval?
Well, typically they will submit the bill to the city, but then financial services passes it on to me for approval, and then it's paid.
Is there any possibility that someone at the city could have gotten something prior to the work being done?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Wow. Commissioner Williams-Cox, and then I'm going to entertain a motion.
I just wanted to point to the itemized listing of what they're saying were the reasons for the increased cost. It looks like some of it they're saying is our fault because of the additional work that they had to do and there's some delays that they were waiting for responses from Finance Department. So on the flip side, we're saying they didn't let us know this, but on the other side, if we caused some of this, they still should have shared with us because it took an additional X number of hours. This is what the cost is going to be. Because if Director Slay had learned that there were some issues in getting responses timely, I'm sure he would have done something to expedite that. So I'm just saying, I too am going to agree because you have a bill and we don't want to make the paper for not paying our bills, but we also want to make sure they understand that we need to have better communication because an additional, we appreciate the $11,000 discount, but $44,000 is a nice little chunk of change.
I couldn't do this. I work for myself or clients. I couldn't just go back and say,
Yeah.
by the way.
I think under, to be honest, I think under any other circumstances besides us sitting in these chairs and having to make this decision, if this was something I did at home, I probably would contest it pretty viciously and strongly. But we are where we are right now. I need a motion for.
You got a motion.
Motion was made by Commissioner Dozier, seconded by Commissioner Merritt. Oh, Commissioner Villalobos. Right.
I didn't second this one.
Yeah, Vice Chair Villalobos. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries with one objection.
Good man.
And I would like for you, I think the board would like for you to send some correspondence to let them know the displeasure that we had in having to swallow this pill without knowing about it first.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Next item.
Would be the FDOT reports.
As your new, old DOT liaison, I'll be your point of contact with the department for the foreseeable future. So if any of you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or go through Mr. Slay. He can get up with me, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. And with that, that's all I have.
I got a complaint while you're here. What's happened to Suzanne? Gaston County, right? Where'd Suzanne go?
She took a position in Gaston County.
Right,
Planning director.
Not saying we don't want you, but.
Well,
thank you.
We enjoy Suzanne much better.
To welcome you on board, I complain to Suzanne every meeting about 319 from at least Capitol Circle south, all in Leon County part. You turn right on the Southwood, it looks great, grass is mowed, sidewalks are clean. You head south, it looks like a hellhole. I mean, nobody cares for the sidewalks, nobody trims the grass, there's limbs growing over the guardrails, and I briefly talked to Kristen about maybe city or county stepping up to help, because whoever the DOT has in a contract, I mean, that's the gateway to my county. And that's the gateway for people of Leon County going to the coast or to visit relatives or whatever they're going to do. And it's horrible. I mean, it's got sidewalks, it's got grass medians, but nobody takes care of it. And again, I'm just going to keep complaining about it. And hopefully something will get done.
Mr. Chair, on point.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Meredith, you brought that up at the ARPC meeting. I did ask the county administrator to look into it, and I have not heard back on whose responsibility it is. Different portions of Capitol Circle, I believe, are maintained by different entities. So I did ask the question, but I'm glad you brought it up here.
That is definitely the DOT. They have a contractor that does that. I don't know if it's in the city limits or not, but anything anybody can do to help. It's not a very big stretch of road. If it's just from Capitol Circle to where the 4-lane ends, which is maybe a mile or two, but it's just, you know, it's all nice when it was first done, and now it's just been letting downhill. I mean, people don't want to walk on a sidewalk. There was a limb hanging all the way across the sidewalk. You got to walk around it into the road just to walk around it, and it's a shame. And it's in Leon County. No, what color?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Walker.
Yeah, we got the same issue going on in Jefferson County as well, with DOT not maintaining the roadways. So we've got the same issue in Jefferson County with DOT not maintaining the roadways all the way out to the easement line. And there's a wildflower policy in effect, but we're going to change that, and we'll be getting it with you guys as soon as we do that. Because I know every time I've called, that's always been the issue, is where you got a wildflower policy, and it won't allow us to mow certain times. But what they do is mow about 5 foot off the edge of the road and in front of people's houses. They don't like weeds growing up 10 foot tall between there and their house and also. But we'll be getting with you guys on that as well.
We had some recent meetings about wildflowers, and talk about a long board meeting. You talk about wildflowers, feral cats, senior citizens or veterans, you're going to be there a while.
Mr. Pollack, welcome back. Any other comments? All right.
No.
Yes, seeing none, we'll go now to the executive director report.
Just one item. We are putting out the regional mobility plan update for consultant selection. Commissioner Dozier had graciously volunteered to sit on the selection committee. So the selection committee will be herself, Jack Estrue and Greg Burke from our staff, Andrea Rosser from Star Metro, and Chris Rito from the ARPC. So that, probably look for something hopefully by February in terms of a contract. Jack's nodding his head vigorously yes to get the regional mobility plan update. And that's all I had, Commissioners. Everybody have a safe holiday.
Thank you. I just have something, let's see where we're at. Correspondence, things from members. I'll speak real quick. MPOAC, it was a great year. I served as chair. I do plan on putting my name in the hat to be chair again in January. Would ask that if we can, since we're right here in Leon County, we have the advantage of having the executive director right here. If Carl would come give a presentation to the board about the legislative issues that we have chosen to take on this year. Is there any objection to that by the board? None.
You're not going to do the monitoring mileage again, are you?
No, I don't think that was on there. Yeah, enough people made a.
Howard Curtis?
I think the bigger issue this year is going to be the texting while distracted driving.
Distracted driving is something that.
Along that lines, you know, we had a long conversation about the gas tax money dwindling. Are y'all any way forward looking at that?
I believe there was a big conversation about finding alternative ways to fund that transportation fund, because the gas taxes going down and looking at increasing it sometimes just isn't a possibility.
For our new members, most county road maintenance in the state is funded by gas tax dollars, but a Prius doesn't pay gas tax. They still use the road, and when you start getting excellent gas mileage vehicles, your gas tax dollars start dwindling less and less and less, and we have less money, and you have less money to maintain your own roads. My suggestion was tax tires. Nick didn't like that. Everybody wears tires now.
I think the way we worded it was to ask the state to look for alternative funding mechanisms.
Tires.
Yeah. So it's not, we're not pointing specifically at any one thing. Just look at some alternative funding mechanisms to put in place for us.
Curtis, you remember the thing about the controversial.
yeah.
I do.
A couple
Track of
of
people's mileage.
years back, there was something on there to talk about vehicle mileage traveled, and then there was some articles about whether or not we
Very
were tracking people.
They thought we were going to do it, so everybody shows up mad.
So we
Right.
downgraded to just, hey, find another way for us to fund it, because gas tax ain't gonna be able to fund it all. So if Carl can come back and have that conversation with us. And for those new members, the MPOAC Weekend Institute for Elected Officials is an amazing way to learn exactly what you're doing here. For Rick, it's the transportation version of BAC, the workshops that we have there. For those city commissioners, I'm sure that you guys have some kind of certification for commissioners at the municipal level. Is very similar to that. Talks about what we're supposed to be doing while we're sitting here. Talks about ways we can get things on and off the list. How these organizations actually started, and the fact that it's more of a federal thing than it is a state thing. So if you have the opportunity, there's 2 chances to go. There's one chance, March the 29th through the 31st, 2019. That will be in Orlando, Florida. Second opportunity is May 31st through June 2nd, and that's going to be in Tampa, Florida.
CRTPA pays for that, right?
CRTPA pays for what, 2?
1 or 2?
One.
As many want to go, but don't 5 or 10.
Well, as many as want to go. What I would say is, if those new members would like to go, I'm pretty sure we can find in our budget for the 3. March 29th through 31st, 2019.
I was going to say,
I- we
you should have one right there.
Yeah, okay. And then May 31st, May 31st through June the 2nd. And if the 3 new commissioners would like to go to that, then we can find it in the budget for you all to go this year. And I would highly recommend that you all go. As a matter of fact, we were having a conversation at our last MPOAC meeting or a couple meetings ago about it would be a great idea if, before being a chair of an MPO board, that you have to go through that training. Is that valuable? It's not anything. Some boards have instituted it, but it's not anything that we've done.
Yeah, no, we have not.
No, we have not. It's not anything that has been mandated from up top here, but it's a valuable experience to take part in. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like that suggestion, and if we do consider a restructured executive committee, we might want to make that a requirement of the
I'll have to go
executive
then.
committee.
I've never been.
You never been?
Too cheap.
Oh, come on, man.
Yeah.
You ain't paying for it.
And I mean, you know, I went, but I was brand new, and so even a refresher for me. I mean, I may consider going again at this point. It's been 4 years ago, and so even a refresher. But we might want to consider that for this restructured executive committee as a condition for a person serving on that body.
Great.
I would just ask, by show of hands, who on the board has attended the training?
Hasn't it?
As attended.
No, whoever wants to go, just let us know, and we'll make accommodations.
I
You have
would-
to double up on the hotel room.
Can't get them to do it Tallahassee, can you?
Uh-oh.
No, I would ask.
I said no.
I would ask for the more senior members of the board if we could allow this year for our new commissioners to go, and then next year, if we have some folks that want to go, then we should.
I would say if anybody wants to go, let us know. We can. I think we've got an adequate travel budget.
Okay, well, hey, anybody want to go? Let's sign up. Commissioner Dozier?
I was just going to say, I think we should make a motion to make Commissioner Meredith go.
Yes.
You've been sitting here this long,
Make
and
the
you're going to be
motion now,
chair.
and Commissioner Meredith does not go.
I have not spent any taxpayer dollar on travel in the last 8 years since I've been elected,
Well,
except, gas. But
This is
I
something
understand.
covered by
If-
CRTPA, not Wakulla County. That is
Well,
significant.
and to take that a step further, if it makes you feel better, it is actually mandated in state statute
Yes.
that we provide training opportunities
Provide.
specifically to MPO
So you have to go.
members.
Yeah. Just my last word on that is it is a awesome opportunity, and I hope you folks will go. Dr. V.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to chime in for the new members to understand the importance of the MPOAC Institute training. I went twice. These acronyms they're throwing around, and there are so many acronyms in the transportation world that you will learn from that institute, and all these CRAPs, LAPs, CROP, and so many others that it is a very, very educational and enlightening. The second time, the first time I went with Commissioner Richardson.
Yeah.
And then the second time I went, I learned more the second time than I did the first time. And
So was he distracted?
Y'all weren't partying.
yeah, he was distracted the first time.
I think they share.
Yeah, it's a very. It is. I will personally, as someone who has gone, I will strongly encourage you to go. It's very, very educational.
Dr. V went for me then. And Nick's done an excellent job as chairman, by the way.
Thank you, I appreciate it. The other thing I was going to bring up is that this legislative season is coming, and for those members that were here last year, and probably for those that weren't, you probably read in the paper some of the I want to call them assaults, but I will call them assaults that were sent towards MPOAC boards by some of our legislators, and I would guarantee you that some of those will be coming right back. So for our executive committee, our new chair and vice chair, and our executive director, I hope we'll all give them the flexibility to be able to handle whatever they have to handle during the legislative season, whether it be to send letters of support for certain things or to go across the street and have conversations with those legislators, because what we do here is very, very important work. And the thing that was talked about last year was how were the rural counties being treated at our MPO boards, and I hope that our rural counties in city feel as a part of what we do here as every other county and city here.
Who sponsored that bill?
It was
Halsey?
Representative Bashir's.
Well, he's leaving.
Yes, I actually had a conversation with him, but if he's leaving, he's got somebody that can bring it back up. And he said it was a response to some of the things he was hearing from rural counties about being in these board meetings and getting ran over by cities and larger cities.
What color?
Yeah, and there was one thing that was said that wasn't happening here. It said it wasn't happening here, but just I hope that we'll give our board chair and our vice chair and the executive director the flexibility to be able to do what they have to do and help them out any way that they need it.
Nick, on that point, Chris, we were trying to form a rural MPO for some of these rural counties. Was there any traction on that, or?
Just briefly, the DOT has, state offices have commissioned a study to look at how rural counties are being served or underserved through the transportation process in the state of Florida. So the latest update is they should have the results of that commission study probably in late spring, and they'll go from there. So there has been some thought about potentially forming rural transportation planning organizations for the counties that don't have a seat at the MPO table.
And the reason why is like Franklin County, Taylor County, for example, Calhoun County, they don't have a seat at the table.
Right.
And we do. And that's not really fair for them.
Right. It's been a pleasure being your chair.
Good job.
Thank you for having me this year. Any other thing from members?
Motion to dismiss.
Motion to dismiss. Any objection? We're dismissed.